Boxing King Media in association with Boxro. Dominic Ingle. Dom, I contacted you this morning to speak about the big fight this weekend, and obviously since that's happened, something big's quite broken out. Conor Benn failing a drugs test, unfortunate circumstances, but just want to get your first reaction to that.
Well, you know, it happens in boxing a lot. You've got UKAD, which is the gold standard. You've got VADA, which kind of takes the stuff, takes over for in America, where they don't have as good drug testing as they do in England, and it keeps everybody on the same level and the same playing field. And you know, he's failed the tests. And it happens in boxing, that's why you have drug testing. You know, what's done about it, or it goes from there, who knows? It's only just come out. But like I've said, and I will say time and time again, failing drug tests is a grey area. It's not black and it's not white. There's no black and white to it. There's always circumstances, there's always instances, you know, and there's things in place to determine whether people are guilty or not. And you have to wait until all the evidence is in. You know, I'm looking at social media this morning, it's exploded, it's this, and there's pictures going up of Conor Benn in terrific shape, and, you know, people making inaccurate statements about, you know, what this particular drug does. It's just a load of nonsense, really, from what I've read, you know, regarding the stuff he's failed on, a female fertility drug. But
I'm going to come to that. What I want to ask you first, Dom, is just in the build-up to it. Obviously, just going back to the start, it's fight week, and it's obviously just come out. Obviously, you've got experience with Billy Joe in the past as well, where stuff's come out in fight week. First of all, the question is, why on earth does stuff like this come out fight week? Because
with VADA, the testing, the good thing about VADA, and it is good, is, you know, we have UKAD all the time. They come to the gym, they randomly test at your house. VADA, when you're signed up to the VADA program, they have a protocol where they may be testing you twice a week, all the way up to the fight, even fight week before the fight. We've had this with Kell Brook with Amir Khan over in Fortaventura. You know, they come in they're testing you twice a week. For weeks and weeks, and even the fight week, so it's standard, and then the results have to be processed. So it's no surprise, really, on a Wednesday. They probably got tested, they probably got tested at the weekend. So, you know, that's how it is, and it should be that way. It should be tested all the way. And that's you know, why a lot of athletes don't sign up for it.
And what happens in that circumstance? So when one of your fighter fails, how do you get notified? What happens?
Usually if it's VADA, they tell the promoter, because what you've got to remember about VADA is an agency. They don't put any sanctions out. They're just a collection agency analysing it, and then they give the results to the governing body, or to usually the promoter. And then it's down to the promoter to inform the relevant parties. That's where it is. Whereas UKAD is a government agency, a sport, you know, which conducts testing on sports. So there's no leeway with them. They do the sanctions and everything. Do you understand? They do the collection, the analysing, and they make the sanctions. It's totally independent of anybody else. All VADA can do is report the findings to whether it's the organisation of the WBA, the WBO, the IBF, WBC, Boxing Board of Control, you know, American organisations. That's what they do. They don't do the sanction. It's down to the governing body then to do the sanction.
And then obviously the drug that's been notified is clomiphene. I hope I said that right. From what I've read, a female fertility drug, which sounds odd in itself. Obviously, you got people online suggesting all sorts. And I've said some comments. People are saying, "Oh, maybe it's to hide something else, etc., etc." But I know you've read up on it, so I just want to get your professional opinion on this particular drug.
Look, it's a fertility drug for women to cause ovulation or more quality eggs, and you know, that's what it is. And I haven't read too much about it, but it just seems a bit strange. Look, people making statements, uninformed, uneducated statements, you know, if it's for a doctor to say what it does, or some kind of sports scientist. It's not for ex-boxers and every Tom, Dick and Harry who's got an opinion, who's done a bit of Googling, you know. I just read some of these statements and I just have to shake my head, because, like, it's people making uneducated guesses, really. So, you know, let the process begin, and you know, it'll be under control. The Board of Control will deal with it already, or VADA, or whatever it is, and the result will come out, and that's what it is, and that's what you've got to wait for. You know, we can all have his opinion and, you know, blow it up, but, you know, it'll get resolved at some point. And, you know, it's good to see when testing's in place, you know, the things are getting picked up what should be picked up. There'll be an explanation, either rightly or wrongly. There will be. But there's circumstances for things, and that's a fact in sport and drug testing.
And obviously a statement's been released by Matchroom and Wasserman, and basically saying that the fight is looking to go ahead. They're waiting for the B sample. So obviously I'm no expert on it. Just explain to me, what happens with the B sample. Like, could it get done today, tomorrow, or is it like a longer process?
Well, you always have the option when you fail a test to you do your sample. It's a certain amount. They split it into 2 containers, and that's the A and the B sample. They save the B sample in a fridge. They test the A sample. If there's anything in the A sample, then they inform you. Now, the reason you have a B sample is because people say, well, my A sample's been spiked. Do you understand? But they save the B sample, and in very rare cases, when they test the B sample, sometimes it's not the same as the A sample, and if that's the case, then the drug test is invalid. But 99.9% of the times, the B sample is exactly the same as the A sample, and you can actually go to the lab and watch them do the process of it. And it's whenever you have to, as an athlete, if you want to have your B sample tested, you have to pay for that. It's about 800 or 900 quid. So people do have it done, and like I say, usually 99.9 times, out of 100, it's the same as the A sample. But it has got to be, if you can either accept the findings of the adverse analytical findings of the first one and say, well, I accept that, and we'll go from that process and I'll try and explain why it is, or you can contest it and say, I want the B sample doing. It's an expense, and generally, more often than not, it's the same. But until they've done that process if he requests his B sample, then he can't be any disciplinary action until they've actually, ascertained that's what's wrong. That's the same thing, and that's the process. So it can be done, straight away. It might even be being done now if you requested it. If you said, well, I want it tested now, but it'll take 24 hours.
I'm guessing the common sense approach would be to get it tested after the fight, and that way, obviously, the fight's free to go ahead.
Well, yeah, but if they test the B sample and it's still got the banned substance in, then then he's obviously there's a protocol in place where they follow a procedure for a B sample matching the A sample, and whether that's a suspension or they suspend the fight or whatever they do, it's down to the governing body, and it's down to the promoter, and it's down to the fighters. Ultimately, it's down to the governing body because they're sanctioning the fight on their territory. So, regardless of the agency where it's failed the test, like the VARDA, it's still a British border control fight on British soil. So that's got to be. It's going to be. I think ultimately, I know Eddie's saying the fight can go ahead, but that's fair enough. Whatever they're going to do, that's their decision, and the fighters have said fair enough. But I think ultimately it's going to rest with the board, and I don't know what the board are going to do. I mean, the board will be having to think about what they're doing now. So, we'll be waiting on that news because it's only just broke.
And I think Billy Joe Saunders was in a similar situation with Andrade, back in the US. That fight got called off. Is it a similar sort of situation? I think they called it off, and obviously down to the board.
There was lots of things going off with that, and it's America, it's VARDA, it's different. I never really got into that. There was lots of stuff going off with the management and VARDA and the commission in Boston. There was, it was a bit of a mess, to be honest. And I don't think it was resolved satisfactorily, but that's my opinion. It resulted in Billy not being able to fight, and Andrade got an easy crack at the title, and that kind of derailed Billy a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, because people will put it together with the Billy thing and how that was handled and how other tests have been handled, and everybody loves a good debate, don't they, and a good conspiracy theory. So I think even when the results come out, whichever way it goes with this Conor Benn thing, people will still be convinced of one way and people will be convinced of another. Nobody's going to say what, if there's a reason why he doesn't get, there's no action taken, there'll be some theory why he should have done, and there'll be people who are pro Conor Benn and people who are not. So it don't really matter. All it matters is to Conor Benn how his career goes from that point, whether he's going to get banned or not.
And how is it for the fighter? Obviously, you've had first-hand experience. How must he be feeling right now? Because he'll be reading all the stuff people are saying on Twitter, casting opinions on him. It can't be easy, kind of, before the biggest fight of your life. But
you're right, and it's demoralising for fighters because there has been lots of cases in the past where I'll give you an example, and this is a long time ago before drug testing was as good as this. There was a fighter years ago called Jeff McCreesh. Jeff McCreesh, he didn't have a muscle on his body, but he could fight. He was a ginger-haired kid. And I always remember he boxed one of my fighters. I think it was Steve Goodwin, I'm not sure. And I think my kid might have won on a disqualification. But Jeff McCreesh went over to Italy. And he might still be on the internet, this. and he went over to Italy and he won a European title fight. He was drug tested and he failed a drug test on a banned substance. And the banned substance was some kind of steroid or whatever, which should make you look fantastic. And he's, you know, as a boxer, he just had a very, very flat physique. You would never in a million years thought he'd been taking PEDs. And he protested his innocence, and just look at him, you just think, never in a million years. And it was, when they did an investigation, the lab in Italy was actually tainting the samples, because he won the fight in Italy, so he got suspended, and they did an investigation on the lab, and they realised that the lab was messing about with the samples. So, you know, that's one of the things. I'm not saying this has happened in this case, but that's obviously was known back in the day for a lot of, you know, dodgy stuff going off like that. So, you know, that's what you got to look. You look at boxing and how people can make assumptions, and because he's failed a drug test in the case of Jeff McCreesh, and you think, no way in a million years. But like, he had to go through the procedure, and maybe for 6 months his head was probably up his backside and he was in turmoil and everything else, but he got cleared. And that's what you have to do. You have to wait for the clearing process or whatever the process is to. But it's not good mentally on the fighters, because, you know, probably everybody had Jeff McCreesh down as being a drug cheat, but he never was. It turned out he wasn't that way. So you've got to wait until the process, you know, it goes through and see what the results are. But mentally, it's not good, is it, for fighters?
Definitely not. And I spoke to Conor yesterday, and one of the things I picked up was that on his debut, you know, people are commenting that he was slapping with his punches. For him to go from that within 6 years to become a top-level fighter and headline a pay-per-view, and I commended him on that yesterday. I think the disappointing factor will be people, as you know yourself, will kind of cast judgment on the steroids, the failed test, rather than the actual skills, because PEDs don't improve your skill set, do they? No,
it might improve your physical recovery and your ability to take a shot, but skill is skill. There's no drug in the world what can give you skill. You know, you just be probably a more physical, fitter version of your former self. And, you know, obviously Conor Benn's gone back to the drawing board and it worked on what his problems were. That's, you know, what his inabilities were or his weaknesses were. You know, he's got a good trainer in Tony Sims, who's, you know, brought a great load of fighters through. So it's going back to the drawing board, and, you know, people are easy to cast aspersions, but he's obviously done the work. But, like, you know, social media and the internet social media, you know, they love the conspiracy theories, don't they? There's never any, you know, smoke without fire, so to speak. But like I said at the beginning of this interview, drug testing is not black and white. It's very, very grey, and that's why, you know, there's so many people's comments and opinions on it. It's not black and white. So let's let the process go through and see where it all ends up, and it'll be dealt in the way it's been dealt with. And I think the last question on that subject is, if he wins this Saturday, it's going to be disappointing because people will not give him the credit, because it's the skill set that'll win him the fight. It depends how he wins the fight. I mean, if he goes in there like a one-man wrecking machine and flattens Chris Eubank, people will say that, and if he wins it in a different way, they'll still say, well, it was because he was fitter, he was stronger, more durable. There'll be lots of reasons why. But I just think I've read something earlier where it says, you know, Conor Benn and Eubank have both agreed, even though this has happened, that they're willing to fight. So whether Eubank thinks, well, you know, maybe I know about this particular thing and it's nothing to worry about. And it's the same. My opinion is that good fighters are good fighters. You know, and I would imagine that at some point in his career, Conor Benn will have been randomly tested. Everybody does. They come to this gym and they test them in 4s and 5s. When we had Billy Joe Saunders, Liam Williams, Kell Brook, Kid Galahad, Lee Wood, John Gill, you know, one time 3 or 4 turned up and tested everybody. Obviously, somebody's, you know, put something into UCAD, get to that gym and get them all tested out, do some random testing, yeah, and nothing comes up. But if you listen to the internet, you know, in this gym, it's full of them. But the reality is, when people come to this is what people don't realise on the outside. This gym is open, you know, for anybody to walk in. The drug testers come on a regular basis, and, you know, you don't get people failing tests. So they might do after fights. There's been an odd 1 or 2 after fights, but at a time when you're not expecting it, they turn up any time. You know, Kell Brook, one of the most tested athletes. Billy Joe Saunders, one of the most tested athletes. And look at the shape of Kell Brook over the years. You know what I mean? You've shown me pictures today of Conor Benn. Well, yeah, well, boxers who train hard you know, regardless of ability level, look like that. You know, Kelbrook, when he's not training, he looks like nothing like he's in shape because he's not training properly. But when they come to competition time and they get in shape and they're on a good diet and they're sticking to the training, yeah, of course they are. Genetics is the thing. Is with Conor Benn, he's genetically in good shape. His dad was. You know what I mean? Same with Chris Eubank Senior, Chris Eubank Junior. It's genetics. That's like you're kind of born with those things, you know. Both great shape. The fathers are both in great shape, trained. It's the genetic thing. So, you know, it's going to be down to skill set who wins. You know, wins on Saturday night.
And if the fight goes ahead, which I'm hoping it does, break it down for me based on Conor's improvements. Obviously, he's a fantastic fighter now, and obviously Chris has kind of been the same ferocious fight all throughout his career up until his last couple of fights where he's kind of decided to box a bit more. How do you see it playing out?
I mean, I don't actually know who's training Eubank for this fight.
Training himself, apparently.
Training himself. Well,
in fact, I spoke to Ronnie Davis. He's getting trained by Ronnie Davis and Anthony Brown, so he has got training.
Ronnie Davis has obviously been through his dad's career, you know, for a long time, and Ronnie Davis was a very good friend of my dad, and he's old school and he knows what he's looking at. So he's in as good a hands as he was, maybe better than Roy Jones Jr. And I think, you know, you have to ask yourself the question: why did Chris Eubank not use him after his last win over Liam Williams? So what I will say is that depending, I mean, I know Chris has got bad hands, he's a good boxer, he's fit, he's a bigger man, he can do the 12 rounds. Conor's obviously coming up, upper weight, which will be good for him because he'll have more fuel in the tank. Chris will have slightly less because he's having to make weight. He's older, Chris is older, so there's, you know, Conor Benn's got to kind of put the pace on him early and try and take the steam out of him. But, you know, Chris is very good at slowing people down in the ring. He did it with Liam Williams, but to be honest, it was a substandard Liam Williams in that fight. It wasn't the Liam Williams I knew, and he had Liam in trouble early on in the fight and could not finish him. But Liam is a very determined fighter. He's a tough man to beat, and I think that was purely down to making the weight, you know, wrong. And Liam came on stronger in the, you know, back end of the fight, but the rounds were past him then. So what I will say is, I think Chris Eubank is going to win on points, you know, easily on points, or round about 10, 11 and 12, the effects of his shots, even though they're going to be knocking Conor over, because I think he's got more resilient, he's going to damage him a little bit. It might be cuts, it might be on the ropes. I think it's going to be later on. I think Eubanks is going to wait till Conor kind of runs himself out of steam. He's going to be smart with him, try and pick his shots, nick the rounds, let Conor get hyped up, force the pace, and wait till he starts to dip. A bit like Chris did with Nigel in the first fight. You know, Nigel Benn was full on, and Eubank was under fire all the way, and he took some big shots. And then eventually, the combination of Nigel pushing too hard, wasting energy, and getting clipped in between, all of a sudden he just went. And I think it's going to be a similar thing with this fight, but later on I think it might be like between 10 and 12.
Sound. Dom, thank you for your time. Anything else you want to add before I let you go?
No, it's looking forward to what's ever happening. I mean, it's obviously all up in the air. It might not even go on, who knows? You know, we're on Wednesday. We've got a few days to go yet. There could be things in place. Somebody could put the block on the board, or, you know, either fighter might have a change of art, a change of mind. The trainers might do. In this day and age, who knows? That people are so influenced by social media and everything else, you just don't know what's going to happen. So the fight, you know, the fight might happen, it might not happen, who knows? We don't know yet.
I think one of the tweets I read earlier was, again, I don't know if this is factual, that Chris may
clause to be shifted.
Weight clause, that's what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, probably. He might use that as a bargaining chip. He might use that as a bargaining
chip. Hydration clause, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, he might use that and say, well, you know, this is where you are at the minute. You know, I'm actually, you know, putting myself at risk. I'm going to take this fight, but, like, you know, realistically, I don't want to be messing about with this hydration clause type of thing.
Dom, just picking up on the news that's just broke, that the British Boxing Board have called the fight off. Your reaction to that, is it the right decision?
Well, they're the governing body of the UK and it's on their territory, and ultimately their responsibility. If anything goes wrong in that fight, they're just open to liability, and they can't afford to do that, because last time that happened with the Michael Watson thing, it kind of ruined them. And, you know, I half expected that. I can't see how the board would allow it to go on. But you know, stranger things have happened. But the board being the board, and the procedure they should follow is that, you know, so it's out in the public. You see, the thing with UKAD is that they don't release the results of any failed tests until really the hearing. And if it was a failed UKAD test, the fight could probably go ahead, and the board might not be able to stop it because it's under investigation. And all they can say is that, you know, if you go ahead with it, then the sanction are going to be worse. We advise, we wish to suspend you. But the board can suspend anybody at any time for any reason, for anything. They could suspend me for this if they didn't like it, because that's the power they've got. You know, they don't have to give a reason why. They just call it bringing the game into disrepute, and I've had that a few times. So whatever there's actually a rule in their rules. Whatever they seem, you know, fit to do, they can do, and nobody can contest it until they've had a hearing about it. And I've been pulled in that one a few times. So, you know, if I can get pulled in for stuff like speaking out of turn, what's bringing the game into disrepute, that's probably why I didn't kick off too much about the Kid Galahad decision, because, you know, you talk out of turn, you talk about referees not doing the job properly, it's bringing the game into disrepute. So just keep your mouth shut. So I'm not saying they've done the right thing, they've done what they're supposed to do. They're the organisation, they're the sanctioning body. It's ultimately their choice and their decision.
Could a different boxing board jump in, like, you know, Frank's used Latvia? No, because the Board of Control control the boxing in the UK. The only way this can be got round of is if Conor Benn and Chris Eubanks hand in the licences, and Eddie gets in a load of different officials from a different organisation or somewhere else, and they do it that way, like they do in a YouTube fight. And there are other people you can get in to do it. You could get ex-judges and referees who've been with the Board of Control who now no longer work for the Board of Control, but for other people or for foreign organisations. And even when they retire at 65 in England, they can still work for organisations in America, for the WBC, or the IBF, the IBO. You can still work to a different age, but you've got to have a licence in that country. So there's ways around it if you want to, but the fighters and the promoters involved in it have got to think about life after this event, because if they do that, if they circumvent the Board of Control, 100% there'll be repercussions, and they might not be given the licences back, you know what I mean, for future fights. So if they make that decision to give up the licences to make this fight, and, you know, Eddie does the same thing, there will be repercussions, obviously, but, you know, whether they want to do that or not is another issue. We shall see. It's a big money fight, and there's a lot of money involved. So it will be very interesting now, because we're going to get a head-to-head with the board and Matchroom. So it's interesting, and it's going to create a lot of drama, a lot of interest for people. I'm just glad I'm not involved in that fight. I think social media is blowing up as we speak, so let's see how it all unravels. It's disappointing. I do feel sorry for both fighters, you know, because at the minute we don't know if anyone's guilty or anything, so I do feel sorry for them, because they've obviously put the work in, and obviously the fight looks like it's off.
We shall see.
Dom, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.